What's up everyone, it's Q from Retro Q Gaming. Feeling better, that's all good, but before I get started on this video, I want to give a shout out to Blue Point Games for a couple of reasons. One, we all know they do excellent work. If you've played any of their ports or anything like that, they've done Titanfall on the 360, they've done Gravity Rush Remastered as you're seeing right here, they've done the Uncharted collection on the PS4, but you know, that only names but a few of their works, and we all know that they do excellent. MGS HD collection as well is definitely another one worth mentioning. So we all know that their remaster quality is fantastic, and this comes in a day and age where not only are brand new AAA games released broken, but remasters are shoddy as shit usually. If you guys remember, a little while back, when the Bioshock collection, the Bioshock HD collection, when that was released, I made a video shortly after talking about all the performance issues and the lack of quality issues and all in that. I know that has nothing to do with Blue Point Games, but if you remember in that video, I actually mentioned that I contacted Blue Point Games to essentially praise them for their excellent work, and how, you know, in a sea of shoddy remasters and shoddy ports, they shine out as a #1 beacon of quality. And they actually got back to me and they hooked me up with this free copy of Gravity Rush Remastered, which is pretty badass on their part. So I mean, that's the second reason I want to give them the shout out. The first one was for their quality work, and their second is just for being badasses and hooking me up with this game. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about Gravity Rush because, you know, it's not a sponsorship or endorsement video or anything like that. It's about a completely separate topic. I just wanted to put that in because I never got a chance to record and give them a quick thank you for all the work they've done and for Gravity Rush Remastered. So that's what the start of this video is. So I've gone on for 2 minutes about talking about stuff that this video isn't even about. So let's move on to what it actually is about. So the PS4 Pro has been released. It's a few days old at this point. A lot of games, I think there's 30 plus games at the moment that actually already have their PS4 Pro enabled patches. So we all know that it's going to take advantage of the even more overclocked CPU and the beefier GPU in it as well. So, you know, some games will do checkerboarding, upscaling, some games will do native 4K, whatever it is. There's all different variants and all on it. But one of the key things is that Sony have said that when you make a PS4 Pro game or a PS4 Pro patch or PS4 Pro mode, whatever you want to call it, that it has to run, regardless of the new features and extra quality and all that, whatever, it has to run at the equal or higher frame rate than the base PS4 model. Now, I'm sure you know where this is going already when I'm talking about this. I'm sure you've seen over the last few days that all the main media outlets and all that kind of crap, there's probably even a bunch of YouTubers all talking all about it, but I haven't really looked myself as far as the YouTube scene goes. But the main thing I want to talk about is that I'm sure they've made tons of reports and videos and all that certain games in PS4 Pro modes actually run worse than the base versions of the game on PS4, base PS4, non-Pro PS4. Now, I'm going to there's one specific example that everywhere is using, and I want to use that specific example, but in reverse. So we all know it's going to be The Last of Us Remastered. Okay, so The Last of Us Remastered on a base PS4 runs at 1080p 60 FPS. It keeps 60 FPS about 95% of the time. I've played through this game multiple times, like probably about 10 times now since it came out on the PS4, and it's a great quality port, and we all know that if you have played it as well, you know that it doesn't keep 60 FPS 100% of the time, but it does keep it almost 100% of the time, which means it's a great quality port and it's a great experience because of the very consistent frame rate. And yeah, sure, it does drop 1 or 2 frames here or there, but it's not often. Now, one thing is, one of the things you'll see when all these other media outlets and all our people are talking about all this is they all use the same kind of clickbait and the same kind of whatever it is to get your attention. Sure, they might elaborate and expand on it once you're in there, but the title is generally clickbait. Now, if anyone, I haven't decided on by the time I'm recording this, I haven't decided on an actual title of this video yet. I am going to try come up with a good one that is not clickbait, and that hopefully will get people in here with their expectations tempered for a different view on it, because I'm taking it for a different view. So like I said, most of these outlets are using clickbait titles to get people into this. But what they do, the average clickbait title that they kind of use, or along the lines of it, is Last of Us Remastered runs worse on PS4 Pro than, base PS4. It's something along those lines. Now, there is a reason for that. Is the PS4 Pro version of The Last of Us Remastered has two settings. Okay, so there's two settings if you have a PS4 Pro. You can play it in 1080p mode. I believe it's called 1080p mode, or it's referred to colloquially as 1080p mode. And you can play it in native 4K. Now, if you do decide to play it in native 4K, it caps at 30 FPS. I believe, from what I see everywhere, is that it will keep the 30 FPS cap 99 to 100% of the time. So we're not talking about that mode, because that's fine. I completely understand it. If they can do that, that's brilliant. Now, what I do want to talk about is the 1080p mode. Now, even though it's called 1080p mode, obviously you have the option to run it if you have a 4K TV. You can use the 1080p mode. Or if you only have a 1080p TV, you obviously use that mode. So the reason why this is coming up in any sort of issue or anything like that is, like most, if not all, PS4 Pro games, if you do run them at the 1080p setting, what they do is they will internally render at a higher resolution and downsample, supersample if you will. They'll downscale it, supersample, whatever you want to call it, to give you a better quality picture at 1080p. So I mean, if a standard 1920 by 1080 game is only using 25% of the GPU, what they will do is they will crank up the resolution to maybe use like 80-90% of the GPU, and then cram that down, squeeze it into your smaller screen, your smaller resolution, and that will give you an overall better picture. So that's basically the gist of it. Now, The Last of Us Remastered does that. So usually, if you play it on the base PS4, it's 1920 by 1080. Okay? Now, if you use the 1080p mode in the PS4 Pro version, it's actually 3200 by 1800. So that's a significant improvement. That's a significant boost in resolution. That's huge. It's almost double in both aspects, which would bring it to 4K, but obviously it's trying to keep it with the 1080p 60 FPS mode. So it is putting a bigger strain on the GPU, because you are rendering a significant, roughly about a 2/3 of a bigger resolution. So, not 2/3, yeah, it actually will be 2/3. You're rendering nearly like 66% more pixels. No, not 66. What's the best way of describing it? You get what I'm saying anyway. It's a huge increase in pixels, in the sheer pixel density, the amount of pixels that it's rendering in resolution. So obviously, it is going to look better even when it's squeezed down and super sampled into your 1080p screen from 3200 by 1800. It's obviously going to look a little bit better. So you can argue it might be a big bit better. Personally, as someone who super samples a lot of games on PC, I generally don't think it's that much worth it. I mean, I super sample some games from 4K or almost 4K down to 1440p, and the difference is usually relatively negligible. But it does put a significant higher strain on the GPU, both on my high-end PC as well as a PS4 Pro. So it works both ways on that. So even though a lot of people or a lot of outlets aren't really talking about that part of it, so what happens is it'll render 3200 by 1800, squeeze it down to 1080p, and then because of that, because it's consistently running at that resolution on the console, it's obviously putting a lot more strain on the console. So when a busy scene or a graphically intensive scene comes up, it's more prone to dropping frames. So yes, technically, while running on a 1080p screen in 1080p mode, it does technically, in certain aspects, run worse, because partially it can be attributed to slightly more frames dropped over time. because it's running at a significantly higher resolution, and that's putting more and more strain on the GPU. So just remember that. Remember that when you see all these articles and when you hear all that. So remember that it is rendering at a higher than 1080p resolution. It's not simply running at the exact same resolution as the base PS4 version and just running worse. That's not the case at all. So that is something to definitely remember. Now, this is where I want to talk about it, okay? So yes, technically, depending on what way, you're getting better image quality even at the 1080p screen. You may be losing a couple of extra frames here or there. Now, this is where I want to bring up the topic. So, as I mentioned earlier in the video, is Sony have their technical mandate that they are allegedly supposed to enforce, but we'll see how that goes. Obviously, it's early days. The PS4 Pro, like I said, has only been out for 2 days by the time I'm recording this, and it could improve. There could be more additional patches. There could be new ways of development, etc., etc. But Sony have said that no matter what the same or increased resolution, whatever it is, including new graphical effects, features, blah, 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 whatever, that the game has to run, the PS4 Pro version has to run at the same or higher frame rate than the base version. Okay? So we've all established already that even in 1080p mode for The Last of Us Remastered on a PS4 Pro, it is technically running at a higher resolution. Okay? But what I want to see, and what I kind of expected before the PS4 Pro came out, and as we're seeing with this specific game right now, is developers are pushing a bit too far. Now, what am I saying by that? So, obviously, if they chose this resolution and they figured, okay, we can get, let's see, we can get this resolution, downsample it to 1080p, and okay, sure, we'll drop roughly the same frames, maybe a little bit more. Well, yes, including a little bit more, but we'll leave it at that. So what I think they're pushing too far. I think what they should have done is, instead of rendering it at 3200 by 1800, drop it down a small bit. Now, I'm not saying drop it down to like 1440 or something like that. With the amount of frames that actually drops in the tests, drop it down just a small bit. Drop it down to around, now these are just arbitrary numbers, but drop it a small bit. Drop it from 32 by 18 to maybe 30 by 1650. Or something along those lines. So it would only be a small drop, but you would maintain the extra 5 frames or something that you would get. So that's the kind of thing I would prefer to see developers do in the future, rather than squeeze as high a resolution out as possible, just to downsample it, even in 1080p mode, and then get arguably worse, even if only slightly, performance versus the base 1080p version. And like I've said already a few times in this video, I do understand that the trade-off is that, sure, you're dropping a few more frames, but even at the same resolution, you are gaining image quality. Now, personally, when it comes to super sampling, as I said as well, that the gains, to me, can personally be, I won't say negligible, but they're not usually as worth it versus the trade-off of GPU load. In the case of a console, because the power on them is relatively lower, even though the optimization can be higher, is that you can decide to focus on one thing or the other. So I'd like to see them actually do that. I'd like to see them, like I said, instead of squeezing out the highest amount they can to get what they call 1080 or what they call 60 FPS, despite it, you're getting the extra bit of quality. Drop the quality only slightly. I mean, to pick up 5 frames now and again, the resolution drop at that res is tiny. So, I mean, what's the difference? Just drop it a tiny bit, literally a tiny bit. Drop it like 2, maybe even 5%. And that will pick up your frames. And it will still be a significantly improved image over 1080p. So the reason why I brought all that up is that I'd like to see developers do that. Because it kind of creates a bad image for Sony. Not just for Naughty Dog specifically, but for Sony. Because your average person isn't going to know. Like, most of the people who go out there, and if you show them a PS4 Pro and a PS4, I'm like, why is this one more expensive? Like, we'll take, for example, a 1 terabyte slim PS4 is €350. 1 terabyte PS4 Pro is €400. So if you say to someone in a store, it's like, okay, this one is €50 more expensive, but everything plays better on it, or at least certain games play better on it. And I go, okay, what about this? Last of Us Remastered. I played that on PS4. Will that play better? Yeah, it'll play a bit better. Most of the people, there's no point explaining to them resolution or frame rate or anything like that. Most people will just hear it plays better, or whatever way it's described on the package or by the salesperson. And then they go home and they play it, and it plays arguably worse for something that they might not notice too much as an actual benefit. Hence, I'm talking to the downsampling on the graphics, or the supersampling. So the majority of people aren't going to know all these technical details. And all they are going to know is that, hey, this actually runs a little bit worse than my base PS4 back when I used to have it. So that's something important to know as well, because people like myself and many of the other people around the internet who know all about this kind of stuff, we are the vocal minority. There's significantly less of us, but we're very vocal about it. And I have no problem admitting that. I'm not using it as a positive to myself. I'm not saying, oh yeah, I'm brilliant because I know all this and all. It's a simple fact that people like myself and the thousands, and like there could be even hundreds of thousands of people like myself around the internet that know all these technical details. That's possibly several 100,000 out of 40 million plus PS4s. Not to mention PC users, Xbox One users, because of the Scorpio and all as well. So there's a significant, imagine all those people. Like, there could be 250,000 of us that know this kind of stuff. That's still 39.75 million PS4 owners that just don't care, that just realize, hey, I bought this new, supposedly better PS4 and this game runs worse on it. So I want to see Sony enforce that a bit more, so that if a company goes to them and say, hey, our game was 1080p 60, here's our new PS4 Pro patch, it downsamples from 3200 by 1800, it's 60 FPS, it will drop a little bit more frames and a little bit more often. I want Sony to go, no, drop that resolution a small bit so the frames don't drop, or so the frames don't drop any more than the base version does, because you'll still get the increased quality from super sampling, because the resolution will be a lot higher as it is. So I want Sony to do that. I'm not going to harp on about, it's like, oh, it runs worse, PS4 Pro shit confirmed. I'm not going to talk. It's not about that. I'm using common sense here, and I like to think I'm being objective about it, because I want to see the same thing happen with the Project Scorpio as well. I want to see this kind of stuff, because I don't want people to be buying a game, let's say 30 FPS, I don't know, what's another game coming out? Let's say something that comes out next year, whatever it is, 1080p 30 FPS, right? And then you get the PS4 Pro version, and it's still 1080p 30 FPS, but it's downsampled from almost 4K. And it runs worse because of the super sampling. I don't want to see that happen. It's going to cause shit left, right, and center, and I don't want to see that happening. So let me know anyway in the comment section below what you think about the mandate that Sony have for the technical specs and all. Do you think that it is acceptable for developers to super sample to the point where it performs arguably worse at the quote same unquote resolution, but or is it fine, and you think that's okay, that it will drop a little bit and perform a little bit worse in the same resolution mode? Because one of the things to take into consideration is, in the case of The Last of Us, if you have a Pro, you can't run it at the standard non-super sample 1080p 60 FPS. It's either super sample 1080 or native 4K. It's one or the other. There's no in between. You can't just decide and go back to the old one, unfortunately. So let me know all that anyway in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the rest of the videos in my channel.